And we are live. So, welcome to episode 105 of An American Werewolf in New Jersey. I am the American Werewolf. In the house tonight, we have Sydney from the Cinema Cities podcast. So, welcome on board. Welcome to the show. Thanks for stopping by and hanging out for a little bit.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We had connected, and I think your tweet just appeared like randomly, like you might be interested in this, sort of thing. It was one of those. And it was about a movie that certainly, this is primarily a horror podcast. And we cover sci-fi and we cover action thrillers. But of course, there are other movies outside of that. And even within this particular, umbrella, I try to cover movies that have a story, a decent story, movies that aren't gory for gory's sake. I try to find movies that are what I would consider to be good movies. But within that tweet, it covered one of my favorite movies that's outside of this, Anthony Minghella The English Patient. And so you and I started talking about The English Patient and Minghella, and then that led to a couple of more tweets about Michael Ondaatje, who was the author, and the prequel for it that I had read in college, In the Skin of a Lion, so on and so forth. And then I ended up checking out your channel, your YouTube channel. And while we're on here, can you tell people let people know where they can find your content?
My YouTube channel is Cinema Cities, and I'm also on Twitter at Cities1978, and that's pretty much where I hang out on Twitter.
Okay, and what kind of content can they find on your YouTube channel?
I do video essays mostly, exclusively, centered around the depiction of historical spaces in cinema. So rural, urban, domestic spaces and how they're portrayed in film.
Okay. And I thought that was an interesting niche. I mean, I've only been doing this for a little over a year. But, you see a few channels here and a few channels there, and I had never seen anybody who covered something like that. So I thought it was interesting. The timing of it is somewhat fortuitous because I can't remember. Did we start talking about franchises? How did that particularly come up? Was it just the request to come on the show?
I think it was the request, but I think because I made a comment, I think, about how they don't make movies like The English Patient anymore.
Yeah. Which they absolutely don't. I own it. I've owned it on VHS. I've owned it on DVD. I now own it on Blu-ray. And it's just such a damn tragic story. And it's just so human.
Yeah.
There are no absolutes in that story. It's just people that are living and they're making mistakes. And unfortunately, some of their mistakes just have these horrifying consequences. That just, it's something very simple and very small that completely spirals out of control. And yet at the same time, it's not, it absolutely, succeeds in suspending disbelief. You don't have trouble going along with any parts of that story. And one of the things that I've been talking about a lot, and sometimes I feel like I'm like shouting at the sky, I've become like that, that old curmudgeon, kind of guy, is where are these other types of movies?
Right.
And I talk about this often on my show. Where are the westerns? Where are the dramas? Where are the war movies? Where are the romances? Hell, for that matter, where are the martial arts movies? You don't even get those anymore.
No, you definitely are not going to get them at the movie theater. That is 100% sure. I will say you'll get them on streaming services, or it'll be a television show, but you're not getting those genre films by the studios put out for the movie theater. And if you do, they're not putting the marketing behind them. Like, we were talking about Macbeth.
Yeah.
This is a prestigious film, Macbeth.
Yeah.
This is a one of the Coen brothers, Denzel,
Yeah.
like you were saying, Francis, a literary work that many people are familiar with. This isn't just some random story.
Right.
And you can't even see this at your local movie theater.
No, I had to go. It was 50. It's a 50-mile travel to see Macbeth, but the local Scream movie, excuse me, was playing 11 times that day. There's a new A24 movie out with Noomi Rapace. I think it's called "You're Not Alone." If I'm not, yeah, You Won't Be Alone with Noomi Rapace. I want to see that movie again. It's another one that I have to travel 50 miles to go see. But Doctor Strange, I checked on Friday, is going to be playing 19 different times on Friday at the same multiplex.
Yeah.
So it's almost like studios. Well, before we get into that, I'm going to hit the intro real quick. So if you're okay with that, we'll do that and then we'll get into it a bit more. Sound good?
Hit it.
All right, boogie boogie. So we got a couple of comments here. We have Patrick from Have Cheetah Will View, and he's saying good evening. And he's saying the Westerns are out there on the indie level. And to some extent, that is absolutely true. And he says that Cyrano, that's true, was released by MGM this year. But I think like what you were saying, Sydney, they almost seem to make these movies grudgingly now. And they give it a minimal marketing push.
Yeah.
And it feels to me, and I've had friends say this to me when I mentioned Scream and Macbeth. Those movies don't make any money, and Scream does. But at the same time, it feels like, movie companies are making the movies that they think we need instead of what actual, I think, moviegoers want to see. It's like having this conversation by saying, well, look, people are only eating chili dogs. But when you look at the menu, there's only one thing on there. And then you're sort of backing, see, people are only eating chili dogs. Well, if that's all you're offering me, then it feels a little disingenuous.
I think that obviously the movie studios are a business. They're in it to make money, and they want to do what's safe and what they know is going to bring a clear profit. I mean, it costs money to take a risk, and it's easy to stick with an IP that everyone knows or reboot something that they know, like Top Gun, Maverick, which I want to see it. I mean,
yeah,
no shade on Maverick, but they know there's a built-in audience for those films. Going back to The English Patient, I mean, thinking that we would never get The English Patient made today is 100% true, because they didn't even want to make The English Patient when The English Patient was being made. I think whatever the first studio was involved, I think it was Fox, they pulled out funding from that film while Minghella was filming in the desert, and only because Miramax believed in the project, they came in and gave them the rest of the money, which was only $45 million was the total budget for that film. It cost $30 million for one episode of Stranger Things.
And, the funny thing is that, I don't want to appear to be, I want to go along. I want to watch. I watch the franchises. There are two things. Two things that I've noticed. One, I don't want it to be the entirety of what's on the menu. Two, there's a horrendous drop in the quality of these programs. They're not good. If you look at it with any sort of critical eye, because I grew up in a time when, it was okay. I'm just going to turn this movie on and turn my brain off for a couple of hours. Don't misunderstand. I grew up in the age of Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I watched Predator, but there was much more of a balanced, sort of diet going on because that was also the time when like Oliver Stone was coming out with Platoon, and I saw that movie as well. I saw the Terminator, with James Cameron. Again, another sci-fi, horror flick. But at the same time, I also saw Amadeus. There was a balance to. There was, more than one thing to choose from. And so, sure, as a young guy, I wanted to go see this, shoot 'em up movie, but I also balanced it out with some other things. And what I've noticed is that increasingly there's just less and less choice available. And if there is something out there, it's very difficult to get access to it.
Yeah, original stories are very hard to see. I will give you an example. One of the best films I thought that came out last year was Last Night in Soho.
Okay. Yeah.
I love that movie. It was I couldn't see it. I couldn't see. I had to wait. I live in Southern Illinois.
Okay.
So my closest city is St. Louis. But even then,
right.
you would have to go past the city out to the suburbs to one theater that does art house and foreign films and that sort of thing to see that
Sure.
movie. I had to wait until I could buy it on television to stream it at home. I couldn't see it in the theater. And I think it would have been an amazing experience to see that film in the theater, but I couldn't see it because my local movie theater wasn't going to have it because they knew possibly maybe it wasn't going to get a shot. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if they thought, okay, I'm not going to bring that in because it's not going to bring in the bucks. So those films don't get a chance because I think maybe everyone's in a precarious situation and they have to be like, okay, I know this one's going to bring in the crowds and fill the seats and we're going to make money on this one.
See, here's the thing with me personally. I don't know where you were when you sort of realized, oh my God, like the board's just being wiped. The franchises are just running the board, whether it's Middle Earth or, James Bond or, the Fast and the Furious, my God, Jurassic Park, whatever the franchise was, they've just completely run the board. But what happened with me was in 2010, I left the United States to go overseas and I ended up staying there for about 10 years. So I came back in 2020. So movies were in Hollywood and what was offered at the multiplex was in a completely different place. And so what I was able to access from 8,000 miles away, because I was living in India at the time, or Indonesia, or, wherever I was at that particular time, in terms of American movies were blockbusters. Because certainly from 13,000 miles away, if I'm in the middle of Jakarta, I'm not going to see an American art film. Or I'm not going to see the newest thing that Juliette Binoche has done. I'm going to be getting The Rock. I'm going to be getting, and then by the time I got to India, I'm going to be getting, the MCU, or Harry Potter or whatever. And so for me, I didn't realize it at the time, but, that was very nourishing to me because I got a little taste of home. I didn't understand until I came back in 2020 that they had just sort of knocked all the other pieces off the board. And then I came back in 2020 and everything was shut down because of COVID.
Right.
So we were in the lockdowns. And then, at that point, that was when streaming services had sort of made their move. And then, I started doing this channel. And then, because now I'm sort of looking at them deliberately with a critical eye. And I'm like, oh, my God, like there's nothing available but this anymore. And a lot of it is actually, it's bad. And I think when you mentioned, they're making safe content. Yeah, that's absolutely true, which to me means that, and hopefully the pendulum will swing back the other way, a lot of the wrong people are in charge of these movie studios.
Well, yeah, I mean that's true, but I think the whole consolidation of studios. I mean, Fox is now owned by Disney,
Yeah,
so there's no more 20th Century Fox.
no,
So
no,
MGM is owned by Amazon.
yeah. And
You
it's
know,
rumored that Bezos wanted that strictly to get his hands on James Bond. So he
right?
just bought everything,
He bought everything for
one
a
franchise.
franchise, yeah.
Yeah,
And so then I guess Miramax got bought out a while ago by Paramount. So you have all
yeah.
of this consolidation, and then you have people who, I mean, the pandemic didn't help our situation at all because that pushed everyone to streaming, closed the theaters.
Yeah.
So I think that they're business-minded people. They're not artists. Their first priority is to their shareholders. So they are going to go the safest, easiest, quickest route to the buck, which is
Well,
giving us another Indiana Jones.
everything that no one is asking for.
Right. They're going to give us.
They want to give you everything that no one is asking for an 80-year-old. I love Indiana Jones.
Mhm.
The first Raiders of the Lost Ark to me is a perfect film. It just is. There's like no wasted anything in that film. It's just perfectly streamlined, but nobody thought that he was going to have to come back 40 years later,
Right.
still playing the same, guy. Yeah, hold on. Patrick says, oh, he shared this on his community tab. So maybe some more people will drop in and say, hey, thank you, Patrick. We appreciate you, man.
But I also think like you have to remember that this is what Hollywood does whenever it kind of gets panicked. It sort of falls back on what the easiest route is. When they switch from silent films to talkies, those films they went back and they redid the silent films as talkies because they
Yeah.
do like, okay, well people have already seen this. They like Seventh Heaven. Let's redo Seventh Heaven. Let's redo these movies. Then you go from TV. TV comes on the scene. Movies are seriously threatened the same way they're kind of threatened today. Viewership at the movie theaters totally drops. So what do? They pull back up their old stuff. You've got Clark Gable playing the same role he played in 1936, playing the same role in Magambo. They just switch out the leading ladies so that they're younger. They redo the regurgitating content, and they take, Lassie is a movie. Lassie becomes a TV show. They just are.
I,
It's the same thing. They get panicked and they're like, we got to fall back on the things that we know are going to bring us money and save us.
I remember that, when it was the early 30s and, audio started to become a legitimate thing in film, the transition that so many actors had to, like, they didn't know how to act with dialogue. So there was just these overly flamboyant performances because they're trying to still be in the mode where they're, trying to physically act out the dialogue, and then, use the dialogue at the same time, and you're like, what the hell are you guys doing? That was an ugly transition. I remember when we talked about Todd Browning's Dracula, when he did that with Lugosi in 31, and so many of those guys were still very much in the mode of the silent film
Right.
frame of mind, except for Lugosi, who just seemed to get it, that he had this less is more approach, that just completely made him the alpha. Like he stole every scene in the movie, as he well should have.
Yeah,
Um,
but that's one of those incidents or situations where a whole industry has to recalibrate itself. I don't know if you ever seen Singing in the Rain where they're hiding the microphones
I
all
don't like.
over.
I'm not a
Oh, yeah,
musical guy. Not a
yeah. Well,
musical guy.
they have to hide the microphones because people are so used to silent movies. So you could move, the camera could go, no noise is recorded, but they get these new cameras that record sound that are in these big boxes, and they can't move them. So actors have to stay in one place, and they have to talk into, I don't know, this vase of flowers that's randomly put here because there's a microphone. So panic sets in. But just like we've got panic now, they don't know what the future holds.
So you're optimistic, or are you cautiously optimistic that the pendulum
Cautiously,
will cautiously optimistic that the
cautiously
pendulum will
optimistic.
swing back the other way? Because
Yeah.
yeah, I'm I'm in the center. I really am, like walking like right on the edge between just saying, all is lost, and no, every wave eventually breaks. Because I see the rabid consumption that's occurring now. It's only of late, even in terms of content creation, that I found channels, and maybe it's just because my own attempts at outreach are, getting bigger or stronger. I'm trying to that I'm discovering more channels who are saying the types of things that we're saying. And maybe that's just a formula for content creation. In order to succeed, you kind of want, if you're looking at, that as a goal, rather than the act itself, then you sort of want to cover relevant content. And so, is it safe to, speak out against, whatever you feel the current trends are? So yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of people saying that. There are some, and some of them are quite vociferous, about it. They're, like, this is my line in the sand, here and no further, this kind of thing. So, I'm somewhat appreciative to meet a person like yourself and your channel and your content, that's looking at other things, or, other channels out there that are doing this. I don't know that I'm confident enough to be cautiously optimistic, but I am confident to sort of stand in the middle for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think I had a haha moment the other day when I heard that Kevin Feige announced the Marvel, I guess the Marvel schedule out to 2028 or something, and I kind of
32.
I chuckled to myself, like, we're not going to be into that in 2032.
I think the wave is starting to break on that now, and you're starting to see what some of the content that has been released over the past 6 months. Let's say you're starting to see a lot more. There's some nervous pushback now, and some, not so automatic 5-star reviews for everything that they're doing. A lot of that content is bad. I've sort of given up on the MCU. I don't think I've seen anything since Endgame. I've tried a couple of the Disney Plus series, and I was really disappointed. I'm like, wow, this is bad. WandaVision, I thought it was awful. I hated Hawkeye. Falcon and the Winter Snow, and I'm kind of done. Here's an example, though, coming back to I'm sorry, you were going to say something. I don't want to.
Oh, no, I think I was just going to say, I actually think the television content is better than their most recent film releases.
I've heard horrible things. I didn't see Black Widow. I didn't see the Eternals.
I saw Black Widow. I saw the Eternals. I saw Shang-Chi. Yeah, which I think is the best of the three.
Yeah, and I heard that that's not great. Yeah, and like I grew up reading comic books. So, like any kid, I was like, wow, I wish, this would sort of become the norm, but not like this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's one of those be careful what you wish for kind of things, But, I think the content is disappointing, and, people like Feige, they're not fans by default of their own, of the content that they're producing. I mean, like Feige said, he goes, what did he say? I saw he's not a comic book fan necessarily. Maybe you should have somebody like that in charge of, Marvel, but they don't. I think when I was doing a video for the movie Chronicle, I went through the top 10 all-time movie franchises, and I think number 2 was Star Wars. Star Wars is up after about 45 years, about, I think, almost $11 billion. I think it was like 10.6 billion. And yet they just keep reiterating the same safe storylines. 9 Skywalker movies. Really? That tells me that there's so much rich organic material that you could be using. I mean, you could get a movie like Rogue One, which they almost seem to have done by accident.
Oh, I loved Rogue One.
So did I. That was maybe the best movie I've seen since The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. Great movie.
But yeah. But instead, they just keep giving us these subpar or awful trilogies, series that nobody like. I don't see the point of Boba Fett. Like I'm covering the original trilogy now for the show. We're going to be finishing it up tomorrow to get to Return of the Jedi. he doesn't have a prominent role necessarily, but again, just they're giving you content that no one is asking for. You're up 10.6 billion and you're still playing it safe.
And that's why I kind of respect the James Bond franchise a little bit more, because I mean, they're not giving us something every single year. We're not getting young James Bond in World War II, James Bond we get a Bond movie every 2 years maybe?
About every 5.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they stretch them out. They'll stretch out the Bond films, and you don't get Bond fatigue.
No, and that was part of when we were talking about that, when we were talking about Star Wars, the gift of, and you didn't realize it at the time, but now that we look back on it, the gift of anticipation. You had 3 years between Star Wars movies, and there was no internet back then. You just had absolutely nothing. Maybe, a magazine article here, there, or something else. Now it's complete saturation. Every 6 weeks, you've got something, and it's subpar. And by the time you realize you've been had, they're hitting you with the next thing. And if you're below a certain age, you probably don't realize that, like you're kind of being had.
Right.
And so I think for so many people nowadays, especially young people, their favorite thing is the next thing. And you're just like, wow, so let's hope this just like grinds to a halt sooner rather than later. Hold on a second. Patrick says, I want to see Stingray before the MCU fades. I don't even know what Stingray is. Hold on.
Oh,
George Santa. Very cool. Yeah, Patrick's an awesome guy, and he's we're going to be doing some of our IFC work together. So yeah, he's a great content. Go check out his channel. He's a good guy. But I mean, when's the last time we've had a Western? I just saw an A24 Western the other day in 2014 on Showtime, and I knew nothing about it. Called The Rover.
Oh,
with Guy Pearce and Robert Pattinson.
I like Guy Pearce. I like Robert Pattinson too.
So do I. It took me a while to get. It took me a while to get past those Twilight movies, but he's a hell of an actor.
Yeah.
And this was one of the best movies I've seen in I don't know how long, but just released without any.
Yeah, they come and they go. They come and they go. And I'll even say, The Last Duel.
Oh yeah, that was okay. Yeah.
The Last Duel. I mean, from what the small amount of marketing I saw for, I'm like, oh, okay, The Last Duel. Randomly put it on HBO Max. That movie's like almost 3 hours. Randomly put it on. I was like, 1, it's original.
Yeah.
2, it's different. 3, Ridley Scott is amazing anyway. But I thoroughly was entertained and enjoyed that movie.
It was Ridley Scott doing Rashomon.
It was so good.
Yeah.
Definitely, yes. It was so good compared to, other things that are coming out or have been out. And that you would have never known that movie was that good.
No.
You had no idea.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, it almost seems like, you're just being spoon-fed this content. Like force feeding a baby or something like that. And like I said, I've given up on the MCU. I'm going to give Star Wars one more chance with this Obi-Wan series. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking. Where are the dramas? I guess on the. Huh?
If they do come out, they aren't in the theaters long enough for people to see them.
No.
I was thinking of some movies that I thought were really, really good, and I can't even remember if they even got the right amount of marketing. So I was thinking back, I'm like, that movie, The Nice Guys, with Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling.
Oh, yeah. I didn't see it, but yeah, okay.
It's a Shane Black movie. That movie should have gotten a sequel. I really, that's one of my, probably in the past 10 years, one of my favorite movies to come out. Came and went, didn't make any money. I was binging last night in Soho, actually, same thing. That didn't make any money. I think it made like $20 million. That movie should have done a lot better. Dr. Sleep, and I saw you had an episode on Dr. Sleep.
I love Dr. Sleep.
Dr. Sleep, same thing, one of my top movies in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Came and went.
Yep.
And every time I tell someone to watch Doctor Sleep, they're like, I can't believe I've never seen that before.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll never forget to this day. I was in Mumbai, India, and I'm sitting in there watching it, and I expected nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know who Mike Flanagan was at the time. If I did, then I would have, been pushing people out of the way to get in there and
Yeah.
get get the best possible seat. And I remember when because I'm like, this is going to be, because I think I had read Dr. Sleep, but it didn't stick with me. I think it was one of the few books I ever read on Kindle. And for some reason, things on Kindle I don't retain them. I have to turn the page. And I'll never forget when Red Room appeared on that board, on that chalkboard, and the hair on my arm stood up, and I'm like, what am I watching here? Like, how am I, how does no one know about this?
Yeah, I tell them to watch the director's cut of that film, because that 30 extra minutes makes all the difference. Because I saw the theatrical cut first. I'm like, oh, it's okay. And then, like, you know what, though? I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch the director's cut.
Really?
And I did. And
Okay.
I'm so glad I did, because that's what I tell people to watch. I'm like, watch the director's cut of Dr. Sleep, because you will not be sorry.
Speaking of director's cuts, just to throw this out real quick, since you're a Ridley Scott fan, have you seen the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven?
That's so funny that you mentioned that.
It
I
is
have not
everything.
seen it, and I have it in my
Amazon
queue to buy it. Yeah.
It is everything. It is everything. That, and because like I didn't necessarily, it was okay, the theatrical version. The director's cut is a completely different animal.
Yeah, one of my best friends was like, you have to see the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven.
Yeah, and his director's cut of Robin Hood isn't bad either, if you get a chance. I'm a lifelong Ridley Scott fan myself. Hold on. Patrick says the Rover is excellent. Yeah, it is.
I'll have to.
If you have Showtime, do you have Showtime?
Yeah,
if you
I do have Showtime.
It's on there. It's a dystopian Western. Pattinson is awesome in the Rover. Swallow deserved Oscar nominations. Do you know that one?
I don't know that one.
Yeah, I don't know that one either. Yeah, Kingdom of Heaven. Patrick, Kingdom of Heaven director's cut. The director's cut. I own that on Blu-ray. That is, I'm a definite physical media guy. I don't like necessarily depending on, but I don't like depending on the digital libraries, because they're so fickle.
I actually have started getting more into physical media when I started this channel, my YouTube channel, because a lot of the films that I want to talk about, I feel like I can't find them. So I have to, I got to buy this one because it's just not available.
I find it to be completely worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
The content of those libraries change from week to week, from month to month.
Right.
And I want, at my own beck and call, the ability to pull that off the shelf. Although the thing with Dr. Sleep was, when we had done the episode, I own the Blu-ray with the theatrical and the director's cut, but I was so lazy. I forgot about the director's cut and just watched the version on HBO because I was too lazy to get up and pull out the Blu-ray. I still haven't seen the director's cut.
Oh man, it's like those 30 minutes make all the difference. It's like you would think it wouldn't, because it's like little pieces here and there that you notice. Oh, okay, like a scene's extended a little longer, or they cut to someone, they linger on the face a little longer. Yeah. But it really does make a difference.
So there are director's cuts that are just extended intros and outros, this kind of thing. But then you get some of those, like with the Kingdom of Heaven, and apparently like with Dr. Sleep, where you just get completely just organic material.
Like The New World. You like that movie, The New World, Terrence Malick?
Yeah.
That director's cut, great.
I have that Criterion on Blu-ray, and it's just that's some kind of movie. And again, Terrence Malick, it's Tree of Life. When do you, just instead we're getting the 8th appearance of Thor. Hemsworth playing the same guy, still trying to figure himself out. He's 1,500 years old. And this is what I mean by you're not even getting a story. Like, if you want to make a Thor movie, go right ahead. But make the best damn Thor movie that you can. Instead it's just become this pulpy, sort of confection, and it's like one Oscar Mayer hot dog after another. You couldn't do that. Just eat these things every day for 20 years. But that's what they're putting out there. IFC films. Yeah, that's Patrick's getting on everybody to get on the IFC train. Where are the romance movies?
Oh,
I mean, we're talking about The English Patient, which is just. I mean, I'm not. I don't have an enormous collection of romance movies. I don't sit down and watch, romance. Oh my God, I can't wait to get to the next. I don't do that. But I believe clearly that within every genre of film, there are movies that are just, a level above. And we started our conversation with, a tragic love story about The English Patient. But I mean, they're nowhere to be found. Now that was interesting to me because I was wondering if in today's climate, directors and writers might be afraid to touch them.
Traditional romance stories?
Or maybe a traditional. It's funny. I was watching, of all things, last week, The Empire Strikes Back. And there's that scene where, Han grabs Leia's hand. When he finally, it's been like 3 years since, they've had this push-pull thing going on for 3 years. And then he finally on the ship, he makes his move and he like grabs her hand. And she's like, don't do that, and he's like touching her hand and she calls him a scoundrel and this sort of thing. And I was just like, wow, I wonder if like directors are afraid, of writing, like if something like that were seen today, Harrison Ford would probably not be seen by many people as he would be some sort of awful villain.
I don't know. I'll tell you, look, that Bridgerton over on Netflix.
I've never seen it. I don't plan on it again.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's romance. Like that is romance novel romance. And there's an audience.
Is it?
Yeah, and there's an audience for that.
That's a highly rated show. I've never seen it.
It's very popular.
Okay. Is it well done? Is it or is it just like for effect?
Confession. As a teen, I read a lot of romance novels.
Okay.
So I understand what they're doing with the show, which is basically bringing a romance novel to the screen. Are romance novels high literary art? No, they're not, but they serve a purpose. And I think that show has figured out a way to translate what's on the page in a romance novel, the sort of beats of a romance novel, and put it on the screen.
So it's not literary fiction, but it's popular fiction.
Yes.
Yeah, you've made popular fiction, Pulp Fiction into a Netflix series.
Into a very successful Netflix series that if you like romance novels, this is for you.
Okay.
And it's very successful. So there's an audience for romance.
Okay, so maybe that's just the phase that we're just in a pulpy pop fiction sort of phase. And maybe we can just keep throwing sand in the wheels. Just keep throwing sand, as it passes by, and then as it comes back, you throw some more sand at it, and then, there you go. But I mean, take a look at this. I don't know if I showed you this. I'm going to show you this graphic. Can you see that?
Yeah.
These are about the top 50 films over the past 20 years. So you got at the top from 2000 to 2009, and then from 2010 to 19. And then there weren't that many films in, 2020, 21, Hollywood starts to get back on its feet a little bit and,
right.
These sorts of things. But I mean, in the first 10 years, the top 20, one movie is not a franchise or a CGI fest. Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ. In the next decade, out of the top 24, 100% CGIs and, just franchises. And, like I said, maybe if I was overseas, I still probably wouldn't have noticed. But maybe if I wasn't, doing this channel, maybe I wouldn't have picked up on it either. Probably would have once I returned, because I'd be like, wait a minute, where the hell are the other things? But, those two things combined, coming back here and seeing, okay, well, there's only this. And then even, within, the horror genre, these franchises are just awful. Like I avoided it, but eventually it came on HBO Max one night, and I have a show with an opinion. It's not a one of those, it's not an it's all good kind of thing. And I was sort of, another Halloween movie. I'm like, really? It's been 45 years. Stop. Like, there's no flesh left on this horse. Stop beating this horse. Just stop it. And eventually one night, months after it came on HBO, I was sitting there and I couldn't sleep, and I pulled out the iPad and I'm like, oh God, am I really going to do this? Okay, it's on HBO. Let's watch it. Because maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. Like I said, 9 out of 10 times, but there's always that one time I wasn't wrong. It was worse than I thought it was. So, this whole idea that these things are even good. It's just there's not much.
No,
there's not much. You got to look for it nowadays.
And that's why I watch lots of old movies. I mean, I've always been a classic movie fan, but I've watched a lot of classic movies. And besides, I will check out the IFC channel, but I also have the Criterion channel.
Oh, really? Is that good?
It's worth the money for me.
One of my favorite YouTube channels is Criterion, where they have people go in there and just pick through their closets. And they just, they start going, oh my God, you've got this. And, everybody goes in there saying, I'm going to be really, conservative and then they walk out with like 2 bags, full of everything.
Yeah. The Criterion channel is, I mean, there's always going to be something you've never seen. There's always going to be something that you'll look at it and you'll be able to go more in depth, because there'll be interviews, or you can listen to the commentary version of that movie. It's worth the money. I enjoy it.
I just came in the mail today, my Criterion for a personal shopper.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Oh, really? It's worthwhile. It's on Hulu right now.
Okay. I have Hulu.
Okay. Yeah. It's on Hulu right now, and it's absolutely worth it. And I'm going to be covering on,
write it down.
I'm going to be covering it on another channel next week or the week after or something like that. So when I agreed to do it, I'm like, I could just watch it on Hulu, but then I'm not a collectibles kind of person. Like, I have no problem with buying a used movie. I think you should.
Oh, I don't either.
Yeah, used books and movies, please give them a home.
Yeah,
absolutely give them a home. So I'm happy. And then when that appeared today, I'm like, just in time. So, I mean, I don't know. We're just, I mean, that's just where we're at. That's just where we're at with things right now.
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic that the pendulum will shift back. I mean, it's pretty extreme right now. It's swung one way and it's pretty far up there, but I give it a few years and I think we might see, hopefully, fingers crossed, a swing back to where we get a more sort of balanced experience at the multiplex.
Well, I remember when Scorsese about 5 years ago started speaking out about this, and I was overseas and I didn't get it. But, like I said, there are people who've been sounding the alarm for a little while now. And I think now, more and more people are catching on. And I mean, who knows? It'll probably swing back the other way at some point. And I think long before Feige gets to 2032.
Yeah, hopefully.
We can only hope. And then, my channel, I try to have a discerning eye for the films that we select. Not everyone obviously is a Criterion movie, but I try to pick movies that have for me, when it comes to horror, I try to pick the stories that, aren't necessarily even dependent on the supernatural. Like if you were to take a movie like De Palma's Carrie, that's just about a bullied girl. It's just about a bullied girl who lives in a horrible situation with her mother, and one person, decides to extend her an olive branch, because they realize how horrible they've been to her, only to have, and, there's this one moment in the film where, everybody for just a brief moment sees her as a human being, only to have all these other people just yank it away from her, at the last second. It's like, you don't get to win. It's like that. That has nothing to do with the paranormal, or the supernatural. That's just a human story.
Yeah.
Now, not every horror movie can meet that criteria, but I try to pick movies that get as close to that as possible and to cover as many as of those types as possible. Because otherwise, I mean, you can really go down some rabbit holes.
With the horror genre, you mean?
With the horror, with sci-fi, with action thrillers, these sorts of things. With any genre, I try to pick the better, the better films, or what I would consider the better. Because I mean, I don't know about you. I believe in hierarchies. I prefer some things, so
Yeah.
I'm okay with saying that. And so, by extension, there are other things that I don't. And so I consider some things to be better, which means that some other things are going to be worse.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem with streaming, is because streaming just throws everything at the wall. There's no discernment between the garbage and the art, because you can find beautiful, well-made, thoughtful films, but you have to wade through so much garbage.
Crap.
So many things that just aren't good to find if you don't know what you're looking for. If you go in there with something like specific that you're searching for, okay, fine. But if you're just like, oh, let's see what I can find, who knows? You might not find anything.
Yeah. I found a few movies like that I've just stumbled onto.
Mm-hmm.
That I've just absolutely I'm like, how did and that's a question I have for you. How do you maintain flexibility, like in terms of your selections at this? I mean, we're not kids. I'm not presuming anything, but we're not kids anymore.
Right.
How do you maintain some sort of, flexibility? How do you stay open to new things?
Definitely. I definitely do. I mean, I'll tell you another confession. I did watch that new version of Cheaper by the Dozen on the Disney Channel or Disney Plus.
Okay.
Just because, well, one, I was curious. Two, I'm a fan of the original from the 50s, so I wanted to see what they did in this version.
Okay.
It was not good. It was definitely not good. But I watched the whole thing because I went in and was like, okay, I'm going to go with an open mind because they're taking this approach to it. I'm a fan of the original. I want to see what they do.
Okay.
Did not like what they did. And I can say that truthfully because I watched it, but I went in there with an open mind.
Okay. So you'll just give something a try.
I will try give things a try because sometimes you're pleasantly surprised.
Okay. I don't have a problem with trying new things. I think part of the criteria for that selection, though, is that one, like I said, I sort of use my own intuition. Two, I try to listen to smart people or people that I consider to be smart and, base my recommendations, based on their recommendations or what might be in the ballpark, that kind of thing. I remember, and I have my Disney Plus, but it's part of the package because I'll watch some things on ESPN or on Hulu. I don't use the Disney aspect of it much, but that reminds me of a movie I saw on there on Disney called Togo with Willem Dafoe, which is based on the true story of this sled dog who ran like 700 miles in the middle of a diphtheria pandemic in Alaska. As this man had to take these dogs to another part of Alaska to get this medication because the illness had struck all the children in the town.
Okay, well, that sounds very dramatic.
It was a fantastic movie. I don't know how I ended up on Disney that day. because usually, it's not my thing. But then I'm like, okay, it was sort of a loose association kind of thing. Okay, I love Willem Dafoe. I'll see anything that Willem Dafoe is in. Okay, it's about dog. Okay, I love dogs. So you've got an adventure, in this sort of thing, and it was spectacular. But it's more of a loose associate, Willem Dafoe. Okay, that check. There's got to be
Right.
one or two kind of things, and I'm sure I'm probably missing out on a few things here and there.
Well, that's why I picked that Cheaper by the Dozen. I had an association with it. I think if I hadn't ever seen the original, I probably would have just scrolled on past it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, for whatever our criteria is, it's good to know that we are both, still open to, giving some things a shot, here and there, and that, we haven't completely, closed ourselves off. Because there is a lot of exciting stuff. Like for me, anything that I see that comes out of A24, I'm automatically interested. If I see something that comes from a director like Denis Villeneuve, I'm interested. If it comes from Robert Eggers, I'm interested. If it comes from the Coen brothers, I'm interested. If it comes from Ridley Scott, I'm interested. If it comes from Ari Aster, I'm interested. Hell, if it comes from Rob Zombie, I'm interested because I'm actually a Rob Zombie fan. So things can stay fairly broad, and then you can sort of piggyback other things onto that. I used to pick authors that way. I'd like one author, and then if somehow you'd in their reading or some interview that they had done previously, they talked about another author. That's kind of how I discovered Henry Miller, who was my favorite author. And, I was reading a modern writer, and he started talking about Miller. And I'm like, okay, I've got to find out this, this guy, because he said that Miller was, well, I don't even remember exactly what he said, but, just by association, I'm like, oh my God, this is like the most amazing thing, so yeah, that's kind of my criteria. But I guess whatever works for either of us.
Yeah. I mean, we both love film, so we don't want to close the door on everything because you might find a little gem in there.
Yeah, you don't want to close the door on everything. On the other hand, like I said, I won't be going to see Doctor Strange. Probably, I seriously doubt I'm going to see Doctor Strange. I seriously doubt I'm going to see Thor. I'm gonna save my money on those.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, they've got more than enough people that are out there. And that are watching it for various reasons. Some people watch it just to content create and then bag on it. And then you got some people that are, for any variety of reasons are still watching it. But yeah, I can save my $20 and that works out just fine.
I've got kids, so
you're going.
We'll be seeing Doctor Strange, not opening weekend.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Remember the days when you just kind of watched what your parents were watching?
Oh my gosh, yeah, like Romancing the Stone. Like I'm 9 years old watching Romancing the Stone. I don't know if that's appropriate, but okay.
Jewel of the Nile. Yeah.
Jewel of the Nile, yeah.
Yeah. But
out of Africa with your parents. Like, wait a second.
That's how I ended up watching Amadeus.
Yeah.
My mom, we had, I think back then, we had like one TV in the house and mom was watching Amadeus. So if I wanted to watch something, guess what? I'm watching Amadeus.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still remember that scene where F. Murray Abraham is reading Mozart's work for the first time. And as he turns each page, you hear the music.
Oh, yeah.
And then, yeah. And then he says, there were no revisions. Like there were no, you could see he hadn't erased anything. Like he had just written all of this out. It just flowed right out of him. And to this day, I still remember them. So, yeah. I mean, I think we had maybe we didn't appreciate it at the time, but we had more of a balanced lunch, than the kids are getting nowadays. Because now there's just, well, that's what we've been talking about for an hour.
Yeah. I will say I did let my son, he and I watched The Thing together and he loved it.
Oh, John Carpenter's.
Yes.
What's not to love?
Yeah. And
what's not to love?
He's like, oh, is this one of those older movies? I'm like, yeah, just come watch it with me. He's like, that movie was so good.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something to be said for practical effects.
Yes, I agree
Um, it,
100%.
it triggers something in your brain. I remember I was watching the podcast, and Rob Zombie was on there, and he was talking about CGI, and he said he was watching The Phantom Menace, and he said he couldn't understand why Liam Neeson couldn't act. He's like, this is Oscar Schindler. Like, he's watching, and he's like, what's going on here? Like, Liam Neeson is just stiff, and, and he realized later as he became a filmmaker, oh, okay, he's not trained to interact with a tennis ball.
Right.
He's not trained to interact with a green screen. So even those old Godzilla movies from the 50s where the man in the rubber suit, it just has a completely different effect. Something in your brain is telling you, that's a tangible thing versus, whatever they're doing with CGI now. And now with few exceptions, I have this idea in my head where I say, well, if you pulled all the CGI out of this, would the story hold up? And I'm just like, okay, maybe I'm being too difficult. I don't know.
It's okay. I'm gonna start thinking about that now.
Well, it's a reasonable thing, and you've got to go to see, with the kids and that kind of stuff. But it's not an unreasonable question, I find.
I don't think it is either.
Yeah, so that's just kind of where I'm at with things. But channels like yours that are talking about something completely different are things that I'm having a growing appreciation for.
Well, thank you.
And some of the other channels that I'm discovering as well. I'll send you some links for that are talking about similar things and different types of movies that I think you would appreciate. Yeah, I mean, more of that. And so that's what I mean when I think, things are, and they're saying the same things about, they're having these same types of discussion, which makes me think that, the wave is beginning to break.
Well, let's hope so.
Yeah.
There should be room out there for everyone's taste in all genres. It shouldn't just be,
No gripe against franchises. I'm just saying, don't run the board.
Right.
Don't run the board. Don't do that. All right. I think this is probably as good a place as any to close things down for this evening. My thanks to Sydney from Cinema Cities podcast. Let people know one more time where they can find your content.
Okay, so my YouTube channel is Cinema Cities, and you'll see it because it just says Cinema Cities in yellow. So it's really easy to find. And I am also on Twitter a lot over at Cities1978.
Okay, hold on a second. We got Eric from Hey Internet Eric here. Sorry you missed this. Check the replay for sure. Yeah, please do, brother. Okay, I think we're gonna shut it down for now. My thanks to Sydney from Cinema Cities. You can see her there on YouTube and on Twitter. I'll be back tomorrow. The show will be back as we finish up the Star Wars trilogy with Return of the Jedi, probably the most commercial of the three. By then, Lucas was surely of a mind to be thinking about lunchboxes. And then I'm going to be on another show, the Baron's Hideout podcast on Saturday, talking about what I thought was a damn scary movie, The Conjuring. So, that when that woman jumps off that, oh my God, I was, what the hell is that? Because you couldn't quite get a look at her face, but you didn't want to, and then she leaped on that kid. I was like, holy shit.
I was on the airplane when I saw that movie. Can you imagine?
Was it a nighttime flight? Oh,
yes,
God.
It was an overnight flight, and I was watching that movie. Everyone's asleep, and great experience, though. Great experience.
Yeah. So I'll be here tomorrow. Okay, everybody, good night.